Welcome everyone to the Sacred Hockey Mask. I am Peter, and joining me is
Lady Shasha coming to you from sunny Orlando, Florida.
you hesitated. You hesitated before Sunny there.
I don't it's nerves. I always you should see when Crystal and I do coast to coast with Crystal and Shasha, I always mess up the intro and I always have to refilm it like 3 times. I don't know why I have this nervous tick about intros. I just do.
Well, this is a horror movie podcast. We get together, we've watched the
Mhm.
movie, we talk about it. It really is quite that simple. And up today, we are talking about a very interesting film from Sweden called Koko-di Koko-da.
It almost sounds like that there was a song called Obla Di Obla Da, and that's what kept on playing in my head every time I hear Koko-di Koko-da.
I mean, I don't know if the term itself is something that Sweden, like Swedish, like I don't know, history or myth or folklore or
Mhm.
whatever has, or if it's like an old song there, if it's just made up for the movie. But um, yeah, well, we're going to talk about this. We'll start spoiler free as we always do. This is an interesting film. It's very art house. It's
Mhm.
about a couple who lose their young daughter. Their 8-year-old daughter dies suddenly, and it's set a few years after that, where they are trying to go on a little trip to reconnect. Obviously, they're not in a great place after the events of the opening, and they're attacked by some wacky characters when they're camping. There's like almost like I guess they're kind of circus folk, but not quite. Like they're like you've got the main guy's kind of like the guy who would run the circus. He's got the little hat
Mhm.
on. He's got a bit of a showman vibe. He's like a creepy old man. There's a sort of big guy who's like a big dumb sort of dude,
Mhm.
and then you've got a really tall woman who has big hair. And yeah, they feel yeah like they're from like a town fair or something like
Mhm.
that. Maybe that's a better thing to say in a circus,
Like a
but
carnival.
yeah, carnival. Yeah, the carnies.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that's what I was looking for. I just couldn't quite think of it. Yeah, carnies. They're carnies.
Mhm.
So, uh, but there's kind of a. I don't want to say time loop because that's not really what it is, but there is a repetition of the event playing out multiple different ways, and that
Mhm.
kind of goes into. But it's all serves uh like an art house purpose of exploring their grief about their daughter is what it's kind of really about.
Mhm.
So obviously we'll get into more stuff about where it's going and how it, what it's saying and what it's doing with that in spoilers. But I didn't know that about it. I don't think I knew that there was going to be a repetition element
Mhm.
when I
I
sat
didn't
down.
either.
Yeah. So that was an interesting thing to discover as I was going. Um, but we'll get to that in a second. It's Shasha. What did you make of the film?
I liked how it started out, especially how it gave you a chance to get to know the family, but in a way that seemed very natural. Like you just see them interacting naturally on vacation, and it wasn't forced, and it wasn't lazy writing. You didn't, have the character. Didn't have to have the character say, "Well, you are my wife." Like obviously, we know that they're a family, and they just behave like a family. I really give credit to the direction and the writing on that because it almost felt like you were like the restaurant scene, for example. It felt like you were at a table next to them, observing them. And then
Th-
there's later in the movie when they're driving in the car, a lot of times they would have done the shot, reverse shot back and forth between characters. In this, they position you in the car as if you're observing them from the back seat as they're driving and having a conversation. And I really like those touches in the movie.
Yeah, that's a directing thing. There's like you
Hmm.
almost feel like if the little girl was still alive, this would be her POV in the back seat.
Hmm.
The tone would be very different, obviously, but yeah, like there's a lot of extended just sitting in the back seat watching them from behind, or even once it does move into the front for another scene, it does this a lot in this movie where it'll stay on a simple shot looking at one character whilst the other
Hmm.
character is going around doing other things. But we sort of just hear it and see glimpses of them as they come on and off camera as we focus on the one character who's stationary. There's a lot of that in this movie, a lot of strong directional style, which I also liked a lot. Like I think this had such a strong directorial stamp right from the
Hmm.
get go. The way it handled certain scenes, the death of the daughter, I thought was impeccable. And it's one of those things where
Hmm.
I'm not sure how much I'm going to recommend this as a horror movie per se, because it almost feels like, yeah, there's a lot of horror in it, and it does make even some of the normal stuff before it gets to the creepy people in the woods. Before it gets to that though, even like how they discover their daughter's death, there's this sense of dread as you realize, oh wait, this is it. This is like them
Hmm.
discovering it, and that kind of sinks in. So there was like a real good like real horror kind of element there. And then there's the actual more other horror stuff that comes in later. Uh, but that's to say that I don't recommend it, because I actually do recommend it quite a bit. I think this movie's pretty great. Honestly, it's not necessarily like what I'd recommend a typical horror fan to
Oh
watch.
no, definitely not. This is more. I would definitely say this is firmly art house
It's
horror.
definitely an art house movie.
Yeah,
Yeah, uh,
but it's very dramatic.
it's
I would.
yeah. I was just gonna say
Yeah.
it's a psychological art house movie. It's
Yes.
and it does leave some stuff open for your interpretation. Like there's
Hmm.
definitely some stuff that we can talk about uh as we go. Um, and yeah, because the opening of the movie is just like we see the creepy people in the woods just singing a song. Like they sing the Koko-di Koko-da. Although he
Hmm.
pronounces it Koko-de.
Hmm.
Koko-di Koko-de. Uh,
And the
but
song sounds like it's a mixture between Frere Jacques and there was another song I was hearing. It was Frere Jacques and the Itsy Bitsy Spider. There was some melody that
oh
was similar to
sure.
the Itsy Bitsy Spider.
I mean I don't know if this is assuming this isn't just a real song in
Hmm.
Sweden, then that's probably intentional. It's probably
Hmm.
trying to evoke those types of songs, those children's I don't know what do you
Hmm.
call them? They're not
Like
lullabies.
nursery, like nursery rhyme songs, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, but it's definitely trying to kind of evoke that and uh, yeah, like so you've got that. I think the performances of the two lead actors, which is the couple,
Hmm.
of Ellen and Tobias. Uh, I think they're both very strong performances. Both in the opening section before the death of the daughter, and then the bulk of the film, where they're
Hmm.
very strained as a relationship. There's a lot of bickering. There's a lot of back and forth. And the writing and the acting here is very very strong because it gets across so much with just moments of silence, or it gets across so much with just a moment of like one little line which will just kind of cut deep, and it tells you so much
Hmm.
about how they have been fighting, or how they have been with each other for the past 3 years, because it's 3 years later, the bulk of
Yes,
the story. So
and it's an examination of how two people handle trauma and how differently they are. Like or how differently they do. He handles it by trying not to take life seriously. He's very jubilant. He's a jokey type of guy, um, kind of casual. And she is the opposite. She's very austere. She's very shrill, and she's very always putting 20 on 10. And they're polar opposites in how they deal with their trauma.
yeah, and I think the other thing, obviously, it's about that. It's also, I'd say,
Hmm.
about it's about them not communicating.
Yes,
Like
very much.
because a lot of this stuff early on, where they're kind of in the car and there's a little bit of bickering, there's some awkward silence. So much of it is about them not seeing eye to eye, but it's not just about them fighting over, should we do option A or should we do option B? Obviously, some of that is there, but it's more about how one doesn't understand why the other wants option B or why the other one wants option A.
Hmm.
Uh, it's about not communicating how they feel. It's about not communicating, and effectively, what this movie is all about. It's about the horror, and what happens to them is kind of just an allegory, or a and in a very art house way, because
Hmm.
it's very psychological, but in very uh, what's the word I'm looking for? The
It's
what?
like a metaphor.
Well, that's not what I'm looking for. I mean, it is,
Hmm.
but like that's the I mean, like the tone. It's a very like it's going for this kind of. I don't want to say lynching. I feel like that's what everyone goes to when they're trying to describe like
I was actually going to go
something
even
surreal.
further back and say like Twilight Zone, like Rod Sterling, Twilight Zone.
You make this mistake too. There's no T in his name. Rod
Well,
Serling, sorry.
well, I mean Serling. Yes, I don't know why I put the
the
T,
the reason why I
but yes,
reacted,
Rod Serling.
the
But
reason
yeah,
why
how the stories that he wrote for the Twilight Zone were like parables. There was always more to the story
par-
than just the horror or the sci-fi.
parable, yes. I mean,
Hmm.
all stories to some extent should be a parable, right? I think all
Hmm.
art should be to some extent. The reason why I pointed that mistake out, by the way, is because Tara did that for like 25 episodes of Twilight Zone reviews, and then got annoyed at me that I didn't correct her at the start. So I caught it as soon as I heard it. I'm like,
Yes.
I'm calling this out. I'm doing it right now. So no, yeah. So it's this kind of, but I think parable's a good word here. But I would also
Hmm.
go like it has this kind of fairy tale vibe to it, right? It's
Hmm.
got this kind of. I think parable's good because parable, I think, conjures the idea of the sort of story you tell a child to like teach them a
Yes.
lesson, to warn them something, right? And I
Like how
think,
Little Red Riding Hood is about not
mm,
talking to strangers.
yeah. And I think this has that vibe. Obviously, it's far more complex because it's a complex parable about the dangers of not communicating in times of grief, right? That is
Hmm.
far too complex for any children's parable. But that's kind of what this is. It's kind of the art house movie doing that, and as that, it's kind of great. It's actually very good at that. And there's lots of stylistic things. There's like a after the opening, which is quite. I mean, there's a short opening which is the tease of the bad, the fairy tale people, the carnies,
Hmm.
and then but there's an extended opening with them in vacation with their daughter where we get to know them as a happy family up until the daughter's death. But there's an interlude after that. There's an interlude that is kind of magical and wonderful, and it comes back thematically later. But it's like a paper puppet show.
Yes.
Uh, it's clearly obviously representing what's going on because you've got two
Hmm.
rabbits who lose their little rabbit and they bury their little rabbit, but there's like this colorful rooster that's flying the
Hmm.
the
This is
the the rabbit
this is the second
away.
horror movie this year I've seen them use shadow puppets in. They use the shadow puppets in the Candyman sequel.
I haven't seen that yet, but
There's
yes.
a when you see it, there's a sequence similar to this where they, communicate a story using the shadow puppets.
Hmm.
I like that they're bringing that into film.
Uh.
It's an art form. It's what is it, like 100 or so years old, maybe
Oh,
more.
sure. Yeah, this is an ancient thing. Yeah. And
Hmm.
also the music here in the movie is very good. I think the score is
Oh
is
yeah.
is very very evocative, very emotional, and I think there's kind of this feeling of hope during this little puppet show, but then it kind of obviously gets darker
Hmm.
at the end. Um, but obviously during this moment, like I actually kind of misread. Well, I mean, so much of this is open to interpretation anyway, but
Hmm.
I tried to sort of like, okay, when I recognized what was going on, I was like, okay, what does the colorful bird represent? Is the colorful bird like because the little rabbit in this little puppet show seemed to die when the
Hmm.
when the colorful bird dropped the rabbit. So I was thinking, oh, was that representing like because the movie when we first see her when she's alive, she's actually
Hmm.
looking in the window at this little music box thing, which has like a little painting cartoon of the characters in the woods, right? And they're
Hmm.
chasing the rooster, right, the bird. And I thought, oh, maybe this is like a supernatural thing. And I was barking way up the wrong tree here. I want to make that clear. This is all wrong, but I
Hmm.
only had part of the context so far. And I was sort of thinking, oh, is the bird representing like some sort of pull that was taking her to these like dangerous like creatures or mythical beings or whatever they are, and the bird dropping her is like showing that's what killed her, and like we're going to dig into this more maybe later on as we go, and it's not that at all. Like the like it because we get a longer version of it later on, which we'll get to in
Hmm.
spoilers, but um it actually became a lot more sweet when I realized what I think the bird kind of represents, and uh all the rest of it. So um yeah, we should probably go into spoilers now, just so we can talk about the movie properly. But
Yes.
like lot a lot of great ideas. I think the performances are fantastic. I think the direction is completely confident.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, makes so many moments feel like they have weight, even though like and this is when you separate a movie from just kind of like being functional to actually really knowing what it's doing. Is when every single scene feels important because the direction makes it feel important, and I think this movie has that. So, uh, yes, points to Johan Nelholm. Nelholm. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
but yes, thank you, Johan.
Who was the writer and the director, I believe.
Yes, which is becoming.
Mm-hmm.
If anything, I feel like that's more common these days than having a different writer and director.
Yes.
We're in the era of the auteur, I suppose. Uh, so yeah, so spoilers from this point on for Koko-di Koko-da. Um, I guess like yeah, we'll look at the opening chunk. So particularly, so it's her daughter's birthday, like her 8th
Mm-hmm.
birthday, the next day, and that's why they've bought her this music box that's wrapped up. And they're at the restaurant, uh, which, and like you said, it's very natural. You have these characters that these like comedians are like comedy, I don't know, entertainers coming into the restaurant and they're doing a show. But there's a moment where they're coming in and they kind of interact with everyone, and
Mm-hmm.
and it's that sort of leads us to our main characters, and we see that they are very natural together. They all have like that like they've been at the fair, so they've all got like
Yeah.
the
The
cat
face paint.
paintings on and stuff. Uh, but the big thing that happens here is that Ellen, the mum, she starts to feel a little sick, a little
Mm-hmm.
unwell, and it turns out she has an allergic reaction to this the shellfish that she had on her pizza,
Mm-hmm.
and she ends up when she comes out of the bathroom, her face is all bloated and red, and she looks like a different person, and that's something that they joke about later because they get an ambulance, they get there's a helicopter takes them to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And later that night, when she's sort of back to looking normal, and they're sort of joking about it now, like he even cracks a joke about how she looked like Freddy Krueger when she came out of the bathroom,
Mm-hmm.
and this is all neat stuff. And it's like, and there's a couple of moments on the helicopter ride where the mum says to her daughter, like, "Hey, like if you start to feel, because she ate the same stuff, and she's like, hey, if
Mm-hmm.
you feel bad or you feel anything, let us know. Like, let us know if there's anything wrong." And obviously, given the rest of the movie, I think it is probably safe to assume that it was some sort of allergic reaction, maybe that killed
Mm-hmm.
her in her sleep. Because obviously, I'm at this point, I'm thinking of like, oh, is there like supernatural reasons did something kill her? Did something take her soul? Like, what's going on? But they get her so they're in the hospital and they wake up the next day and it's her birthday. And there's been a couple of scenes where like one of the nurses was sitting talking to her and making small talk and saying, "Oh, you're a big girl now." And there's enough moments that feel very natural of just like people being nice to her, of her parents showing concern for her. And I think the other thing this opening does as well is that it shows you how concerned he is for his wife as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like Tobias's concern for her when she comes out of that bathroom is very strong. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's very important because when they're estranged uh, after the time jump, you can feel that difference. You can feel this
Oh
like
yeah.
awkwardness. You can feel that when they're in a crisis later with the carnies, that like it almost feels like he's not even trying to like help her at first. Like
Mm-hmm.
it takes a few attempts before he seems to actually even be trying to help her. Which is such a big difference to like him just seeing like her face look different and being like, "Oh my god, like is my wife going to die?" Like
Mm-hmm.
you know, sound the sirens, ring the bells, alert the Coast Guard, whatever it may be. Um, but what did you make of the way they revealed the daughter's death?
I thought it was a very dramatic scene. It was well done as far as the acting and how everything was set up. I also liked how the hospital setting was. They had a lot of different. I mean, it's as much as this feels like a very encapsulated movie. They did have a few different locations. Like they had the vacation location where, they're sitting out on the deck. Then they had the helicopter, and then the hospital. I thought it was well done, and it made you care about them because they gave you that opportunity to get to know them. When this happens to them, you kind of care. Whereas if they didn't give you that time to develop the characters, you wouldn't the scene wouldn't hit as hard. That's what I'm saying.
I like how you spent a moment there to tick like it has three other locations, therefore it's technically not a bottle movie. Therefore, I don't
Mhm.
have to write it off immediately.
It's still my second least favorite genre, which is the survivalist horror movie. Ever since like Wolf Creek to Eden Lake, I hate that we went camping and got attacked movies. I really I don't like them at all. But
Yeah.
this wasn't that bad.
Well, that's because it's not really that. Like, I know on the
Mhm.
surface it kind of looks like that, but it's
Yeah.
not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, no, I mean, I think the discovery of the daughter's death is wonderful. What
Mhm.
happens is that they sneak out when she's still sleeping, or they think she's still sleeping,
Mhm.
but they sneak out and get her a little birthday cake, and they're going to like
Mhm.
wake her up by singing "Happy Birthday," and they're kind of joking a little bit because they're Swedish, and I think they're on vacation, so they they make a little
Yeah,
bit.
they're on vacation in Denmark.
Was it Denmark? Yeah. So I think
Yeah.
he cracks a little joke about what language to speak, what they
Mhm.
what they should sing the song in, and they start singing "Happy Birthday." And after a couple of lines, she's not waking up. I went, oh, holy shit, this is the death. This is how they're going to
Mhm.
find out their daughter's dead. She's not going to wake up from happy birthday. That is like absurdly dark. Like,
Mhm.
and not in a, not like, and not in like a cartoony way. It's like a very sad, dark, like, it's like a darkly ironic death, right? Is to discover it when you're singing happy birthday. There's just like a really sort of like the universe is a cruel place if this is how you come across this. And then and the realization, and they're like, oh, she's not waking up. That's weird. And they go up and like shake her, and they're like, wait a minute, she's cold. And they start, and the scene ends. It cuts to the puppet show, with Ellen screaming, for the nurses and the doctors who come running in, and like she wasn't even really the one who was in the hospital. Like the mum was the one who was really. I mean, I think they checked the daughter to make sure she was okay, like the day before, but she wasn't the one who was the patient.
Mhm.
But they're pressing the emergency button. They're like, come in here, and they're screaming. Like the scene turned from happiness to
Mhm.
holy shit, this is about to happen, to absolute like emotional chaos with just screaming and like frantic like desperation. Uh,
Mhm.
in a nutshell, it was kind of like, okay, if you weren't sold in the movie yet, this scene should sell you in the rest of this movie. This should make you feel like you're in confident hands. And that's what I got from it, because like from this scene, I was like, okay, right, I'm in. All right, what you got for me, movie? Um, and when it comes back for the puppet show, it's the car trip to the camping where they bicker over what ice cream cone she got. It wasn't
Mhm.
even sorry, it was a cornetto. It looked like a cornetto to me, but this is probably a very European thing. I don't know if you know what a cornetto is.
No, I don't.
It's just a
I
type of ice
don't.
cream cone, but it's like a brand.
Mhm.
But they're bickering over the. I think you talk about the movie feeling natural, and part of that is just that we're sitting in this one shot in the back seat as it's playing out,
Mhm.
and usually in movies when someone's driving, we're in the car, like they're not really driving, they're being pulled by another
Yeah.
vehicle or they're being pushed by another vehicle. Um, this felt so natural that
Mhm.
I kind of think that he might have just really been driving, and
Yeah, it looked like he was really driving.
it genuinely did. And I think it was also the locations as well. Like it felt like they were at some sort of like they were connecting to the highway. They were like just
Mhm.
coming out of a junction. It just everything about it just felt like, oh, this feels like a real boring car ride.
Mhm.
This doesn't feel exciting in a good way. Like this feels like a normal, like the awkward and all the sounds of the like the indicator ticking, the gear stick shifting, all the little sounds and details of being in a car felt very natural. And I know that sounds like a weird thing to praise, but so many movies just kind of ignore a lot of it. It's like they don't really care.
And it was the first interaction where you see their lack of communication because her major issue is, "Oh, you got me the wrong ice cream." Why didn't you say that before he pulled off from the ice cream place? You would wait till he gets on the highway and then go, "Oh, this is the wrong ice cream."
Yeah, but
You
then
could have
he
said that like right.
but then he complains that you know I thought that's what you wanted. And she says, well, if you'd paid attention, if you were listening properly.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, I'm a dumb man. I will admit this, but I'm fairly certain that it's not about the ice cream.
Yeah.
It's not about
And
the ice cream.
also, I dislike when women do this. Don't say you should know why I'm mad. That is that
You
is
dislike
super.
when women do that. You
Yes,
dislike it.
yes, because they do it to their friends too. They do it to
Uh,
their female friends too. And I don't. Maybe my mind works differently, but I'm just like, just tell me why you're mad. Because I'm the type of person I will just tell you. I'll say that pissed me off that you did X, Y, and Z. But like it the whole "you should know why I'm mad" thing is just it's infuriating because sometimes people don't know why you're mad.
yeah, I don't think it applies in this case though, because
Yeah.
in this case, this is not like he's done something to piss her off and she's mad about it, but she's not telling him. This is they're both like mad and not communicating for the same reason,
Hmm.
and we know what that reason is. They know
Hmm.
really what that reason is, but they're just not willing to accept that they're struggling and that they have to like find each other again, right? Like,
Hmm.
so it's a little bit dirty. It's not a petty thing. I mean, the ice cream sounds petty on face value, but it's not
Hmm.
about the ice cream. Uh,
Yeah.
like they're dialed up at this point, and and then we hear later on, because we don't get all of this right now. We get like a lot of this initial stuff. Every time when we get to the camping, every time we end a loop, just for lack of a better word,
Hmm.
we actually get a little bit more of the trip there. Whether it be in the car right before they get there,
Hmm.
whether it be when they stop the car and he's like wanting to pitch the tent. So just to sort of bundle that together just now, because I'm never going to remember where each one specifically like happened.
Hmm.
Uh, like they argue about she wants to go to a B&B,
Hmm.
because
Which I'm
motels.
with her.
Oh yeah, I'm with her too. Because I
I
mean,
don't understand sleeping on the ground as vacation.
I
That's
don't
not.
know if motel is a thing that's used in mainland Europe, but definitely in the UK, there's no such thing as a motel. That's a
Hmm.
very American thing. B&B is typically what you're looking for,
Hmm.
uh, but which is bed and breakfast for anyone who didn't get that.
Hmm.
But so she wants to do that, and she's basically begging, like, promise me, like, if we pass one, you'll stop, and we can stay there for the night. And he's like, no, we decided we're going to do camping. That's what we said. We decided camping, so we're going to do camping. And we find out that he doesn't even go to like a camping ground. Like that's where they're supposed to be going, like a designated area.
Hmm.
He basically just says, look, we can just turn here. And he just like drives into a random part of forest off the countryside, which is what leads them there. And like, there's so many, like I say, like the moments where it's just lingering on one person and like they're moving around. There's when they park and she's sitting there, and we focus on her sitting there, uncomfortable, eating her sandwich, and she's mad because there's mosquitoes. She doesn't feel comfortable. She doesn't feel warm. She doesn't feel safe. And he isn't listening to her. He's just, and not that she's voicing a lot of this. Most of it's just in her performance. So again, very good
Hmm.
performance because it's getting a lot of this across. It's mostly little bickering comments or awkward silence, and he's like looking for something for the tent, and he's like rummaging in the back seat, and he walks around, but he keeps like walking on and off camera as we're just
Hmm.
focusing on her, and it's like, and I think what this does, right? I mean, obviously it's a good effect in directing, but what it specifically does in this movie is that every time it does this, whether it's from her perspective in this case, where it's focusing on her and he's like moving around, or there's some scenes later on where it's focusing on him in the loops where we're following him and she's like a bystander in his story, is that each time it does this, it's making it their story, like, or sorry, let me rephrase that because that could be plural too. It's making it just that person's story and the other person's around for their story, as opposed to this is them as a couple united story.
Hmm.
It keeps them separate. Every time we get a moment like this, or every time there's a scene where it only focuses on one and not them as a pair, it doesn't do the traditional movie thing of cutting back and forth or giving us two shots or whatever.
Hmm.
Doing this thing where it focuses on one, and occasionally the other person's like in the frame because they're kind of coming back and forth. But for the
Hmm.
most part, it's just on her in this scene, and that's like making them feel like separate. It's making them feel like they're not in sync because he's moving around and doing things and she's just sitting there. It's just a simple visual thing that just it feeds into the theme of the movie that just makes everything feel a bit richer, and it's just really good stuff.
Definitely. Also, just the I felt like when he turned off the road, it was like almost like an act of aggression towards her.
Oh yeah, for
'Cause
sure.
yeah, he was just like, "Well, I'll show her. I'm just gonna go park anywhere and camp,"
Yeah, is
rather
it?
than again communicating why you're upset.
Yeah, yeah. Like, he's doing it to prove a point, and he's like, "No, we can just camp here." He's like, it's almost that joke thing of like, saying, "Look, I'm camping because I'm happy. Like, look how happy I am as I hammer the nail into the ground."
Hmm.
Like, just that kind of attitude. Again, it doesn't have to say all of that
Hmm.
necessarily. You get a lot of it across in the performances, which is again, it makes it feel like we are analyzing because sometimes performances are very like surface level. This is not
Hmm.
surface level performances. These are very nuanced performances that have a lot of depth, and because of that, we don't have to be told a lot of things. We can see
Yes.
them, we can feel them, we can get them, and that makes it more rewarding as a viewer to kind of
Hmm.
experience. So that stuff is really well done. Uh, and then we get to the carnies and the
Hmm.
and kind of supernatural, but not really, because I kind of don't really take any of this literal. It kind of feels like it's like if you want to read it, it's just it's happening and it's supernatural and it's going on. Then cool. It kind of feels like you mentioned Twilight Zone earlier. It's definitely kind of Twilight Zoney in a way. Um, I would maybe tack on like a not as a depressingly like bitter end as this, but like a little bit of Silent Hill where it's like, which I guess is just me going back to Twilight Zone where they've wandered into a place or at least a state of mind where this happens
Hmm.
to them until they kind of figure out why it's happening to them, and that like gets them out of it, right?
Hmm.
Um,
At first, I didn't know that it was going to be supernatural because when they first approached, I just took them for just three carnies, and one of them was carrying a dead dog, and that should have been the hint that this was going to be supernatural. Because I was sitting here the whole time thinking, why is he carrying this dead dog?
yeah, every time we go through a loop, the big guy's carrying this dead dog. They've got
Hmm.
another dog. They've got like a brown dog who's like active
Yes.
and like biting, but he's carrying like this dead white dog like every time at the
Hmm.
start of the loops, and, that becomes clear. And at the end of the movie, you kind of see, oh, that's where this dog comes from, and this is why it was dead.
Hmm.
Uh, and it kind of implies that all of this happens almost in their heads, like almost
Hmm.
like this is them working through their shit in their heads and all of the crazy scenarios that if they don't get their shit together, if they don't, because I almost see this movie is about the danger of miscommunication. And these are
Hmm.
all the bad things that'll happen if you don't get on the same page. And obviously, it's kind of extreme because it's like, oh yeah, if you don't communicate, carnies will come out of the woods and like kill you. Like that's a
Hmm.
bit of a weird, weird thing. But there's a lot of little symbolic things and how it does a lot of these little
Hmm.
scenes and moments.
Oh, like the cat too. The cat in the stark white cat in the
Yeah,
woods. That
yeah,
should have been a tip off too, because if this cat lived in the woods, its coat would not have been that pristine and clean.
yeah. Again, I don't think of it as supernatural. I think of it as
Hmm.
more like psychological, and then
Hmm.
because I think at the end of the movie, like I don't think those carnies existed. I don't think they were
No,
real.
I kind of looked at it as like a dark fairy tale.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a good way of putting it. Um, so Ellen wakes up in the morning. It's sort of like still a little dark, but not. It's light, but she's still using her
Hmm.
torch. But she used to pee, and she's like, "I'm gonna go pee," and he's like, do it outside. I don't want you to pee in here. Like, go outside." And she does. She goes out, pops a squat, and she sees the cat who runs away. And I
Hmm.
think it's notable that this cat is almost like a because the only times we see the cat are on the way into the forest when we get that
Hmm.
scene. They see it in the road and it runs out the way. And then here it sort of runs out of the way, and then later on it becomes something that leads her to a place. So the cat almost
Hmm.
represents like a warning or like
Hmm.
a guide of some kind.
It kind
A
of reminded me of Alice in Wonderland when she didn't
little
she
bit.
chase a bunny.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the
Hmm.
cat runs away though, and then when she turns around, the carnies are there, and she freaks out because she's crouched
Hmm.
down pissing, right?
Hmm.
and they start like taunting her. The old guy's like says some weird stuff, um, and
The brown dog likes to drink urine, and I was just like, why?
th-
Why
th-
is this happening?
that's a little bit weird. Although I think
Yeah.
symbolically there's something later on with that I kind of
Mm.
appreciate. Uh, and obviously at this point there's enough noise that we eventually cut back to the tent, and Tobias is looking through the little crack at the bottom, and he's like, "Oh no!" And he's going to try and get away, but they like. Is it this first one where they bring him out in his underwear and they just
Mhm.
have him at gunpoint? So because there's a knife in one of the bags and he tries to get to the knife, but
I'm sorry, I had to
uh,
laugh about when he was in his underwear and the old man, doesn't he just, like, tap his junk with his cane? Like, or he points to it or something?
oh no, I was just getting to this. It's not even his cane. He touches it with his finger. He like
Yeah.
so this is the thing. So he's standing there and he's tighty whities, right, as Tobias,
Mhm.
and he's scared and he's been held at gunpoint. And it's we don't see the death of Ellen, but the body's lying there, so it's kind of
Mhm.
you know. And we heard a gunshot, so we presume she's dead.
Mhm.
And they're kind of taunting him, and he does this thing where the big woman's holding the gun, and it's a really old
Mhm.
timey looking gun. It's not like a modern
Oh, yeah, it
gun.
looked like a World War II gun.
Yeah. Uh, but he does this thing where he like put the old man that is he puts his finger on the tip of the gun and sort of goes doot 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 and sort of tracks where the shot's going to go, and he
Mhm.
goes to his crotch and he actually just goes boink on his penis, and like I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of uh, uh, like because he's in his tighty whities and
Mhm.
like he's kind of standing there all kind of cold and like his junk just kind of being there
Mhm.
was kind of like hard to not like notice, but I did not expect the old man to be like bunk
Yeah, I
right
didn't expect that either.
with such glee. But I do actually think there's a symbolic thing here, not so much this on its own, but I think the fact that in this scene like they focus on his genitals, and
Mhm.
then in a later loop, right, when this happens, maybe
Mhm.
it's the third or fourth time, where the dog is drinking the urine from Ellen. The
Mhm.
old man, this like a few loops in, says to the dog, "Oh, why not just go to the source and get the pussycat?" And the dog starts just licking straight from her crotch.
Mhm.
I don't think this is an accident. I think it's very important that their genitals, and not in a gratuitous way. It's not like we see anything. It's not like,
No, it's
and
just
it,
it's implied.
yeah, and it's only one time each. Really, it's not like
Mhm.
something they come back to a lot. It's one time for each person. But I think that's intentional because, uh, to get a bit of birds and the bees here. Those are the
Mhm.
parts that were used to create the door. I think that's
Mhm.
got a lot to do with this. I think this is like in their minds, like if they're feeling guilty about this or whatever, like I think like almost like they see themselves as like responsible for their daughter's death, that they weren't good enough,
Mhm.
even though it's not really their fault, but they brought their daughter into this world. So there's almost like this to them, like their affection for each other, and then literally their genitals, because that's what's used in lovemaking and to create babies.
Mhm.
They kind of like I feel like extreme saying this word, but I almost feel like in their heads they kind of consider their own like genitals as their murder weapons, because
Mhm.
they created a daughter, their daughter was taken from them, that life ended. And there's one of the scenes that we get when it flashes back is like him like trying to initiate sex, like, and not even like for a long time. He just kind of says, "Hey, it's mating season," and he says he's horny, and she just
Mhm.
kind of gives him the cold shoulder, and it's just this like but I do think that's the symbolism of having their genitals be like a target in both
You
cases.
reminded me of oh, what movie was called? It was Antichrist,
Oh
where it
sure,
was a
yeah,
similar
yeah.
similar thing where they lost a child, and there's scenes where both of their genitalia gets injured.
That was a lot more graphic than this was,
Yes,
though.
way more graphic, but same concept.
Yeah, no. So I do think that's a thing. I, mean, I really hesitated using the word murder weapon because that feels a bit
Mhm.
extreme. But like I think in a subconscious way, that's kind of like maybe something they're feeling, is that them using their genitals in that
Mhm.
way is only going to lead to more heartache and more downfall, right?
Mhm.
Um. So we get a few loops, and it's a little bit different each time. Where he seems to be remembering it a little bit each time, where he wakes up and it's like he had a dream. So he starts actually trying to like get away. He tries to run to the car. He tries to pull her to the car. At one point, the like she runs out of the car, and like it doesn't matter that they got like far away down the road. Like the car needs to come and get them. Because again, it's them not being on the same page. Because she runs out the car to go pee. Because she's mad. She's mad that he dragged her into the car. There's another time where she's in the tent and he's hiding in the car in his underwear. But they still find him. They still come and get him in the car. They have to really be on the
That
same
part
page.
made me angry because when he was hiding in the car, I assumed, oh, he's hiding there because he couldn't get it to start. And then after the carnies show up and terrorize her again, he starts at the car and drives away. I'm like, why did he do that? Why didn't he just tell her that, I saw some people in the wood. Like he could have even made it up and said, I saw some people in the woods. We're in danger. Get in the car. And they could have left. But instead, he just hides in the car.
Well, what we've been talking about. This is a movie about the lack of communication,
Yes.
right? So
That was just, and it was, I think this scene was made to make you feel irritated by the situation.
yeah. The way I read this is that so there's a lack of communications from both of them. Don't get me wrong. Like, he's not the better of the two here, but he's the one who it feels like he's at least on face value trying to move on in the world because he's the one who's like trying to make jokes. He wants to go camping. He wants to try and like do things to feel normal again, right? He's the one who's
Mhm.
kind of trying to do that. And I think that's why he's the one that kind of remembers each time, and he's the one who's actively trying to get away, whereas she's the
Mhm.
one who, albeit doesn't understand why he's doing this, is the one who kind of keeps not going or has to be forced, and then every time she's forced, it doesn't work, right? It falls apart because she runs out the car or for whatever other reason.
Mhm.
And I think that's why when we get to the next loop after this, we kind of get this implication that maybe there's a lot more loops that we don't see because it's almost like time has passed. Because when she wakes up the next time in the tent, we follow her. He's not there,
Mhm.
and she gets outside and it's snowing. And the
Mhm.
way I read this is that I think this was kind of like a vision of like if this keeps going the way it's going, eventually they're going to separate, right? And she's going to be alone because she's older here as well. When she gets up this time, she's an older woman. She's like on the other side of
Yeah.
middle aged. And he's not there. There's just like a sleeping bag that's kind of empty and whatever. Um, and she gets out of the tent and she sees the cat and she follows the cat in the footsteps of where he might have went. And it's this kind of idea that he kept trying to move on, but she was left behind because she just refused to move on. And
Mhm.
she follows the cat up to this little, was that a church or was it just a little house? I can't remember.
It looked like a
But
little cabin type
yeah,
of.
yeah, like a little I don't know cabin or hut or something. But she gets in and
Mhm.
it's like a little it's this there's the shadow puppet like stage, and I think I think maybe this when we first saw the shadow puppet thing at the start there was like a
Mhm.
red curtain at least at one point. There was definitely
Yeah.
a shot of a red
There
curtain
was a red curtain that opened, and then you can almost see the silhouette of the carnies behind it, as if they're the ones
yeah,
working the shadow puppets.
yeah. So then so she sits down and she watches the show, and it starts off kind of similar to what we saw earlier, but this time afterwards the colorful bird, the colorful rooster, is still around, and the two parent rabbits um get kind of mad at it, and they get like bows and arrows and shoot it down and then trap it in
Mhm.
a cage. And it's like this really like depressing thing, and this is where like okay, I think I misread what that bird represents. I think
Mhm.
that bird represented the, I don't know what word to use, but the hopes of the daughter, the life, the
Mhm.
spirit, the life force, the energy, the just the the love of the daughter, right?
Yeah.
Right. I think that's
I
what.
interpreted it as them holding on to their grief. Rather than letting their daughter go and ascend into heaven, they're holding on to the memory of her and turning it into grief.
Yeah, yeah. I also that's definitely there. I also kind of read it because um like so they shoot it down and they put it in a cage, and yeah, I'll let you say that's kind of a metaphor for not letting the not grieving, not letting it go, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But I also think it was kind of like it was sad. It lost its color, like its wings fell off, and it was like
Yeah.
this like skinny bird. And I kind of took that as you're also ruining like that memory.
You,
You're ruining, and you're killing that spirit that's there between you that your daughter
mhm,
represented. And then it gets struck by lightning, and it's like it maybe died, and it's like really sad for a second. But then the bird's wings sprout,
mhm,
and it flies up, and it's like, no, the spirit will live again, and it'll be fine. And it's the old
mhm,
version of Ellen who sits and watches this play out, and it's kind of
mhm,
like her realizing this loop that they're in is them kind of like having the bird trapped in the cage, and they have to kind of leave. They have to let this go, and that the happier side of remembering someone who's died, like remembering
mhm,
their good qualities, remembering how they made you feel, and the positivity that can come from that, and all the other things. That's what this bird kind of represents, and they were like killing it. They hurt it, and they injured it, and they killed it, and they wouldn't let it move on. Um, they wouldn't let it fly free, and
mhm,
that's why, because on the little art and the wind up music box thing, like it was these characters, these carnies chasing the rooster. I don't think it's an accident that those are the beings that they see as attacking them, kind of thing.
mhm,
So yeah, so once again they wake up, and Tobias, as he's been doing, just now that he's like remembering things better, he jumps up and grabs her, and they go to the car, uh, and but it's still by force. Don't get me wrong. She doesn't just accept and like go. Like she's still like kind of mad and whatever.
mhm,
But he drives away, and this time she actually wets herself in the seat. She doesn't leave the car. She still stays in the car. That's the important part. Is that
mhm,
none of this is easy. All of it's hard and still kind of looks like bad. Like
mhm.
she gets
And
forced
he's
out,
still in his underwear.
and he's still in his underwear.
Like you would think at one time in these loops that he would just sleep with his clothes on. Like the second time I'd be like, you know what? Let me just keep my pants on.
Well, I don't think the loop starts before they go to sleep though. I think they just wakes up.
But when he
Whatever.
wakes up, he automatically knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, but you said he should just keep his clothes on. The loop starts after he's taken them off.
Mm,
So he's waking up in those tighty whities no matter what. Like
mhm,
that's what's happening. Uh, but they're driving, and then as they're going down the road, there's some music playing. He turns it up. It's the Koko-di Koko-da song, and
mhm,
then that white dog is in the road, and they hit it, which sends the car, like into like a not even a lake. It's just like a big puddle, effectively.
mhm,
Uh, and crashes, and like they're just sitting there in this absurdity, and it's this really stark moment where he's sitting there in his underwear, she's sitting there having like wet herself, and they're just looking at each other, and they just break down crying and hug,
mhm.
and that's the end of the movie. But I mean, barring there's like one sort of like surreal shot of the daughter in like a
The
dark
daughter
room.
sitting there with
Yeah,
the music box,
yeah,
and the three characters are on the music box,
yeah, and they were
which
on the
makes sense because they looked cartoonish. Like especially the
yeah.
big gentleman with the drawn on unibrow. He looked like something that would be in a cartoon and not a real person.
And they were there at the start of the movie as well. I think like
Mhm.
when
Yeah,
Charlotte,
yeah. When
yeah.
they were the performers. I think one of them, or were there different performers? Because it was like a couple with old age makeup on, and the lady had like these
No, no, no,
fake
no, no, no.
hips.
No, I'm not talking about them. They were different
Oh,
people.
okay.
I'm talking about the on the music box at the start of the movie. They were on it then
Oh,
too.
yeah. Yeah, I didn't even look closely at the music box
Yeah.
until the
Um.
end of the movie when they show it again.
Yeah. Obviously, you're paying more attention at that point because
Mhm.
you've got context for a lot of stuff. But yeah, like this movie, obviously, like it's open to interpretation. There's definitely people will have different reads on like certain scenes or certain like things, but like I think that ultimately communication and like at the end of the movie, the ending is them finally turning to each other and just sort of like actually emotionally letting each other in and
Mhm.
letting each other see how each other's feeling. Because everything before that is still like it's still this turmoil. Like, they still have to go through this awful morning, and like imagine like the situation they're now in. Like they will look like crazy people, like because
Mhm.
he's sitting there in his underwear. I don't know if they've got more clothes in the car, if they were all in the bags in the tent, but Like it has this thing. So um, and because the big guy was carrying the dead dog in each of the loops, it kind of
Mhm.
gives you this feeling that all of this played out in a weird way, like maybe like right after they hit the dog, and then before they started crying.
Mhm.
It was almost like time stood still, and all of this happened in their heads in that moment, kind of thing. Um, because they did just kill something else. I mean,
Mhm.
not
Yeah.
intentionally, but yeah, which gives you this idea of like if they did he just wake up and like there wasn't really a loop per se. He just woke up in his underwear and grabbed her
Mhm.
and they ran into the car, and this is where they are mentally because of them just not moving on and not grieving and not communicating and not
Mhm.
uh being healthy mentally. So but really good stuff. Like all of it like works. All like every scene is so well directed. The characters are well established. The performances are very good, and I think it's one of those things where sometimes like when you tell someone, "Oh, it's a movie that's ambiguous and it's open to interpretation and it's
Mhm.
psychological and whatnot," like I do think there's some apprehension sometimes because it can come across as a bit try hard and it can come across as
Yeah.
just kind of like
Pretentious, but
pretentious.
I didn't feel that this was pretentious to me.
No, no. I think that
Mhm.
the difference ultimately is, does it feel that there's actually like a method to the madness and that there's
Mhm.
actually you can kind of feel the ideas coming through. And I think in this you absolutely can. People have different interpretations to a point, but I do think that everyone will kind of agree what the themes are and what the characters are kind of going through, more or
Mhm.
less. Regardless of how you interpret the rest of the movie, I think everyone's going to agree at that moment at the end of them finally hugging and crying is them
Mhm.
finally dealing with what's happened to them and then finally reconnecting over the death of their daughter. So
Yes.
uh and because of that, like everything else rings true as long as it fits into that in some way or another, and I think it does. It's yeah, yeah. I was very impressed. I was
Mhm.
I'd heard some good things. I'd heard a few people recommend it, so I was
Mhm.
optimistic, but I didn't really know what to expect. And I too was kind of glad that it wasn't just, oh, they're right in the woods for an hour from
Yes.
bad guys. You know, I think by the time it gets to like the third loop, you're kind of aware that
Mhm.
this is more about how do we break this loop than it is about, oh, how scary the bad guys are or how
Yes.
intimidating they might be or whatever. So um that was good. All right, well, would you like to rate Koko-di
Oh, I would
Koko-da?
give this a 7, and I would definitely recommend it to people, especially if you like The Babadook, which is similar in that it's a horror movie, but also explores,
Mm.
emotional issues and, and it's also a parable for I don't wanna give away what it's a parable for because that would kinda spoil the movie,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, I enjoyed this a lot more than I thought I was going to. I'm actually kind of, I feel bad I didn't watch it earlier because it's been available on Shudder for a while,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
just kept
this
on, you know
this was like maybe September, October last year, this hit.
Mhm,
So no, really good stuff. Yeah, I think I'm going to go as high as an 8. I think the direction was excellent.
mhm,
I was constantly impressed with the just the tone and the awkward silences between the characters and how everything felt like it was saying something. It felt very well orchestrated. And
mhm,
if you can nail that psychological art house thing, if you can give me that, and I'm
mhm.
captivated by it, and I'm like tantalized by the details, like I can get into it. Um, so no, very good. And if anything, I think I like it a bit more than the Babadook.
Mhm.
The Babadook is a good movie, and I think there's a lot of great stuff in it. But I did feel like the ending kind of was a little bit weird because it kind of it blurred the lines of like whether or not the movie was doing real supernatural stuff or if it was doing like more like allegorical stuff. It kind of weird. I thought the ending was a bit messy for that. Whereas this,
Oh,
I
I took it as more allegorical because I'm gonna say this without spoiling. I took it as them compartmentalizing something that they were dealing with.
sure,
That they were
sure,
still dealing with it, but now it wasn't as strong as it was before, and now and that eventually they'll be able to get it to decrease more and more until it's not there anymore. Which is how usually things. Well, if you have an issue, a particular issue, and you go to therapy, that's generally what your goal is, to chip away at whatever this issue is until it decreases and decreases and it decreases until it in some cases it may always be there, but at least it's only just a little part there and not overwhelming your life.
Yeah, it's been too long for me to make a kind of proper
Hmm.
argument, but I just remember feeling kind of weird and underwhelmed by the ending.
Hmm.
Uh, whereas this, I think the ending works, and I think it's partly because the Babadook feels to me like it's trying to be more of a horror movie, and it's actually very good at doing that.
Hmm.
That's not necessarily that much of a critique, but whereas this, I think it's very clear early on that this is more a it's very clear early on what this movie is. I think it doesn't feel like it ever is pretend to be something it isn't, even though there is very good horror tense scenes. It never feels like it's trying to do. Like, I think the ending feels true to what the movie set up at the start as to what this is about. This is about emotional trauma. This is about communication,
Hmm.
and that's what the everything. So everything I felt fulfilling to me at the end. On the other side of it. So um, but yeah, there you go. That's Koko-di Koko-da. It's
Hmm.
very, very good. I would recommend it. So, by all means, let us know what you think of the movie in the comments. You can, of course, like, subscribe. Those are very important on
Hmm.
YouTube, and ding the bell for notifications. They help YouTube channels grow. You can also support us, of course, by going over to Patreon, patreon.com/MailFuzzTV for as little as $1 per month and get some bonuses for your trouble. And of course, I will thank our Patreon producers, which you get the producer status at one of the higher tiers, of course. But thank you to Tyler Hess, Cindy Palacios, David Short, Board Now, Al Tradesman, Christopher Moy, David Brown, and Stanley. Those are our producers at the time of recording, so thank you very much to them. And you can also catch us on Twitter at Screams Midnight for all of the Male Fuzz movies related updates. So that's for this, Streams After Midnight, and the Atomic Cinema Experiment. And check out those shows too, because why not? Shasha, would you like to promote your channel?
As always, you can find me on What Did I Just Watch? On Mondays, I'm on Hood Podcast, where we react to news of the weird and strange internationally. So, because there is a hood in every country, basically. And I will be returning shortly with Coast to Coast Horror with Crystal and Shasha. And we have a few good episodes coming up for October, and as well as cosplay. So definitely check out my channel for October because that's my month.
Well, you're a horror person, so
Yes.
I mean, lot of horror fans say that about October.
Hmm.
So there you go. That is the show. That has been Koko-di Koko-da. So thank you very much for joining us once again. We always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, and remember that if you see someone wearing the sacred mask, repeat to yourself, "Hockey season ended months ago."